Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
Well, what a weekend that was, watching what happened in Auckland with the torrential downpour and flooding. It was a kind of like a flash flooding, wasn't it? It just happened so quickly and made places people weren't expecting. Goodness.
Especially like the airport really shocked me that it didn't have that infrastructure, or it was just overloaded with what happened. And I'd only walked through there a week before. It made me feel very uneasy to think that that could have happened while I was there, but also that it happened to so many, I would say millions of passengers, and the airlines that are coming in and out of there dealing with that and restructuring, rescheduling, getting people safe and on new flights. Gosh, amazingly awful. Absolutely awful. Yeah.
Yeah, so our thoughts are with the people of Auckland, and there's other surrounding areas as well that have been hit as well. It's not only Auckland, but yeah, there's flooding it takes a long time to recover from, as I've experienced here in Fukushima as well. So yeah, we hope to bring some information about how you can contribute. If you want to, please check our show notes once we have more information about that.
Well, I did see on LinkedIn today a super post I'll mention here. One company was offering up its workspace to people who'd been displaced from their own workplaces. So they were saying, come on in, here's 2 or 3 desks, come on in and pitch yourself here if you need to be working, but you've got nowhere to go. So I thought that was just one gesture, how you can help people who need to have a place to work but can't even put their laptop anywhere.
Right.
I thought that was really, really super. And they'd seen someone else who had offered that, so they were passing it on. I thought that was absolutely super community spirit.
That's great. Yeah, so meanwhile, in Japan.
Yes.
Meanwhile, in Japan, big news is they are going to downgrade COVID in, wait for it, May, late April, May. That's what I saw.
Yeah, so finally Japan is saying, well, actually, it's probably time we can do that. We don't need to have people wearing masks indoors. Hallelujah. And it's being downgraded. Was it to a seasonal flu? Is that right?
Yeah, the same as the seasonal flu. That's really important for hospitals that are actually treating it as, the equivalent of Ebola at the moment. And yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of families being separated from someone that's not going to be around for much longer, and they can't see them because they're in hospital. It's just, yeah, it's really, really
it's tough,
about time to change, I think, downgrade it. At least one level, come on.
At least one level. Yeah, I think Japan's realizing that now, with a lot of gaiatsu, perhaps pressure from outside, but also just, I mean, the numbers are at 3,500, I think, in Tokyo per day, but it's just not going away, and we've got to do this so-called with COVID. And it's great to see, because it means if the government have already said they're going to do it, that basically people will start sort of doing it before the official time to start.
Yeah,
I think it's great. Kudos to the government for making a stance finally to do it. Yeah. It's really, really good to see. And you got to give it to Japan. They're risk adverse, super, super careful. I felt the safest ever during the last 3 years when I was with Japan, and adopting the measures that they had. And it was tough. Sure, it was tough, but I think I felt safe. And so now it's time to move forward. And having been in New Zealand and felt that lack of mask wearing, it really does make a difference. I even jumped on a bus on the weekend to head off to Shibuya, and I didn't have my mask on, and I only realized halfway through, I haven't got my mask on, naughty foreigner. And put it on. The bus driver must have thought, who is this?
Yeah, nobody shouted at you or anything. It was just everyone waited for you to figure it out yourself, and you're like, oh my God. Yeah, and then you figured it out. I don't even know what it was. I think someone got on. I went, oh, mask, that's right. Whoops.
So there you go, 5 weeks in New Zealand, and it made me convert. So I'm looking forward to the change in Japan. It's coming into summer then too, spring and summer, and we really do need to move forward. Obviously, people who are compromised or who have hay fever and all those will still continue to wear them. And if you feel comfortable wearing it, you will. That's masks. But we're looking forward to it being downgraded and moving forward.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what happens in the schools because the children are still wearing masks to school and all day long in school.
Right.
And a lot of children have actually developed a dependency on wearing a mask. And so at some events, when the teachers have said it's okay to remove your mask for this performance before your parents, some children refuse to remove their mask that they and I don't know if it's because if in each particular child's case whether they have a dependency on it for their appearance or if it's they're worried about catching COVID or some other reason for it. But yeah, there's definitely that is an issue that is happening
Mm.
in schools. So it was very interesting to see that, and I wonder what's going to happen next. But in true Japan form, we have several months to get used to the idea that we're going to demask. So
That's right.
this is why they've given it so much time. And I was like, they're gonna announce it. They're gonna announce it. Oh, what May? Come on,
But this is
and this is
typical,
how
isn't
long
it?
it's going to take for people to get their heads around it. And I did a little survey of, average people on the ground here in my part of Japan, and they're not keen. They're
Mm,
not keen to demask. And I,
right.
I was like, wow, why? And they're like, no, I like it like this.
Mm.
So I really wonder what's going to happen.
Really wonder why though too.
Mm. Yeah, and
Mm,
it's not around COVID, it's around other things. Like I like not having to spend hours on my makeup. I like to feel like I'm being protected from other people's coughing and germs or whatever it is. I like to feel anonymous with my mask on. There's
mm.
a lot of different
I think
reasons.
there's a lot in that last one. The
I feel
anonymous.
anonymous.
Yes.
And
I
so
think there's a
I
bit
can
in that.
relax a little bit more in my
Mm,
daily life.
mm.
And it's very much become a safety blanket for people
Right. Safety
over
blanket.
the last
Yeah,
a very weird kind of safety blanket. Yeah. No
yeah.
one's going to criticize me if I have a mask on. Is what it comes down to.
Wow. Goodness
Anyway,
me. Moving on though, Jane, to the episode we've got coming up. Very interesting. Very
yes.
interesting. We're speaking with Tim Harvey, and he has his
Mm,
own consultancy business based out of New Zealand called WITH, With Consultancy. He was with a big sports agency as their Japan representative for a very long time. Oh my goodness, where to
how
start?
many
He's
contracts did
just
he negotiate?
contracts
Yeah.
he's negotiated. He's set 1,000 successful contract negotiations between New Zealand and Japan enterprises. 500, half of those have been rugby related. And he's just so focused on relationships, and you'll hear this all through the episode. Raised with really strong moral values, and that's just really carrying him through the way he does his business with trust, integrity, and conviction.
Yeah. Some really great stories of just doing it your way, even when you don't have the upper hand, really
Mm,
like, creating some boundaries you're not willing to cross
mm.
and being very successful in doing that. So yeah, really great story. And we love the connection with this particular guest to another part of our community, the Jandals community, which is the Dynaboars team. And Tim mentions a few names of the Dynaboar team members who some of them have created their own podcast as well, which is called the Japan Rugby
Rugby
Weekly
Weekly.
podcast. Yes. So you can weekly hear them speaking about rugby in Japan, what they think is going to happen in games, looking at their own games and things, talking about heated toilet seats even, all sorts of fun things about Japan. I'm sorry, you guys, but that was one of the first episodes I listened to, and that was what they were talking about.
That's funny.
What
Well,
I
they
just
do their
happened to be
sort of
talking about.
preview of the matches coming up, but they also have a bit of banter about those sorts
Yes,
of things in
about
Japan. I
Japan
think one
things.
other episode though was being a dad in Japan and how
Oh,
you can do that. That was so
wow.
sweet. You got to listen to that one.
Yeah, yeah.
They're great. We love the Japan Rugby Weekly, and we hope we hear more from them. And certainly we like the Boars as well. Seems to have been our
Yes.
adopted rugby team for some
Yes.
reason.
We
Yes.
are Dynaboars fans. So, yes, we hope you enjoy this episode with Tim. Kia ora, Tim. Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much.
So, we like to start with a warm up question.
Yeah.
We've got a super special one for you today. Tell us your anaba. in Japan? You're a place you love to visit that's off the beaten track that nobody really knows about, but you don't mind sharing with us.
I guess being brought up in Hokkaido, Hokkaido is always my favorite place. So going back to my Kitami, which is top of Hokkaido, which is, I think, still got a few rallies there that I know. So yeah, going to see them every now and then, which is very rare. But yeah, getting to Kitami it's always a good place to go.
What's the name of it again?
Kitami.
Yeah.
And what's there? What can you do there?
It's right at the top of Hokkaido, where it's pretty much snowed under for 5 months of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the rugby teams go up there for their gasku, the summer camps. So it's just a beautiful place. I mean, it's farmland, it's skiing, it's a bit of everything.
Sounds like a great place to get away from the heat then in summer.
It's still hot. No, it's still hot.
It's hot, but probably not.
Yeah.
Not quite like Tokyo. Yeah. How about Catherine? Do you have an anaba?
I've just written down Kitami, by the way, but anaba, I have to admit, Jane, I didn't know this word. So it's a new word for me. Thank you for teaching me. I really love the underrated place of Kyojima, where Jennifer Shinkai, one of our friends, lives, out in Sumida-ku in Tokyo. It's old Tokyo, old Japan, or an old city Japan. And I go down there and I love the old shrines and temples there. There's lots of old warehouses that have been converted into more modern premises. Or you can go down the back streets and see the jichan and bachans selling dried fish and vegetable shops and things like that. So I love that place. Also, my favorite wine bar, Apero, has a little wine outlet there too, which is just lovely. And so that's the place that I think is hidden in Japan that perhaps many more people should go and see.
Very good.
You, Jane, you must have a few.
Well, mine, I think I might have mentioned them before, but Tottori is one of those places where more people should visit and just experience real Japan and real nice people, amazing food. But there's also this beautiful mountain there, and it's called Daisen, and it looks like Fuji from certain angles. It's a very sort of cone-shaped mountain. You can go skiing on it, you can go hiking, and you can see the sea from it, which is really unique. Like, there's not many places in Japan where you can actually see the sea from the mountain. They say there's the only ski area in Japan where you have a sea view from the mountain. So I'm sure they've checked it because it's their claim to fame. But there's also like a Yayoi era village on the mountain, and it's a very interesting place. Yeah, so really see some different sorts of things there.
I have not been there. I have to go there.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah,
really lovely
everywhere though.
Well, Tim, we're so glad to have you on the show, and now you're fully warmed up with the chit chat that we started with. We know that you run your own agency out of New Zealand, but very, very closely related to Japan with consultancy. It sounds really exciting. We're really glad to hear more about it. You've got a history of real intense Japanese rugby athlete management, and we're looking forward to hearing from you today. So we'll be putting your full bio into the show notes. But tell us a bit more, Tim, about your background, your association with Japan, because it goes back to your very, very early baby days, I believe, or even young child days, and how you came to end up working in this industry.
Well, we'll try and keep it as brief as possible. But yeah, was born in New Zealand, but raised in Japan, and was in Japan until I was about 12 years old. So my parents were missionaries over in Japan, and when I was 12, I couldn't say, how are you in English? The Japanese wasn't anything I could speak. So up in Kitami, there was no international school, so just went to the local schools. And then my parents decided, well, at 12 years old, they can't speak a word of English. We probably should teach them their native tongue, and we came back to NZ. So from 12 to 18, I came back, and then was at Auckland Boys Grammar. And then after that, in between not knowing what to do at university, went back to Japan and did a bit of a working holiday experience on the ski fields. I worked at 7-Eleven at one stage, and then got hired. So the rugby started actually when I was 18, when my father had a translation business, went up and took 2 Kiwi players, and I hadn't seen my father for 12 months. So he said, well, come over to Tokyo, spend a week with me, and just spend some time together. And basically with Mitsubishi Dynaboars, which you've interviewed a couple of couple of people already from there. They ended up taking back in the 95, I think it was, one rugby player, and then they didn't have a rugby translator, so I said, well, Mr. Tim Harvey, could you come over and be our translator? So that's basically how I got started. I just had a bit of dumb luck, to be honest. So I got started as a rugby translator at Mitsubishi Dynaboars, and then did that for one season, then came back, started running a golf shop, as you do when you're being a golfer. And then while I was doing that on the side, every time Mitsubishi wanted a rugby player, they'd always come to me and say, well, we need a number 8 or we need a 10 or whatever. And back in those days, there weren't any agents. There were probably mentors, lawyers, there were accountants that looked after rugby players. So I rang 3 rugby players, which was, I probably can't mention the names, but they're the ex-All Blacks anyway. So, and it just so happens the 3 rugby players that I rang were managed by, what it eventually became my business partners. And they were just starting out an agency at the time, and they said, well, we're looking for a Japan guy, clearly know your stuff in Japan and rugby, would you come on board? And back in those days, it was because I was just starting out, they said, well, we want to hire you, but we don't have any money to even pay you. Would you come on as a consultant / we'll pay you commission as you do deals. So that was 22 years ago, I guess we started that one up.
Goodness me. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you play rugby at school? You must have. I mean, Auckland Grammar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, I played rugby as well. I went up to Auckland, played Auckland under 21s. And then being a little man, I got concussed a lot. So
right.
The doctors told me maybe it's not your sport anymore.
But talk about right place, right time, right skills.
Yeah.
And then just, having that lived experience of being in Japan for all that time, picking up obviously a few things along the way and realizing they were useful. That's very exciting. So how did it grow from there?
Yeah, it was, year one, there's nothing to actually look at how do we do it? And I guess coming from a person of a church background, I like taking care of people. So naturally, my sort of natural instinct was, okay, once you do a deal, you make sure you look after that person, you look after them well. Because as you all know, it's going into Japan, it's an adjustment. So, giving them as much honesty as possible. And then when they do stuff up, some brutal honesty is always, my approach or way of getting it. So initially I thought, 2 years it would take me to establish myself as a good agent. It took me 6 months probably to really get into the mainstream. And it was just through, once again, Mitsubishi, started off with them. Then the kantoku, or the head coach at the time, was someone that was well respected in Japan. He opened up a few more doors to other companies, and just grew very quickly. Year one, we did 16 players, and then it consistently did 20 to 30 players a year, I guess.
That is incredible. What does it take then to be a good agent? What is this you're telling us? And I guess too, you're learning from them the other side, especially in this case, in those early days. It's not just one way, is it? You're not teaching him, there's something coming back. Tell us a bit more about that sort of part of your work.
I guess being that translator was a great opportunity, understanding how the company side thought of foreign players. Because, as a foreign player, you become a superstar kind of instantly, and you get treated, a little bit abnormally, if that's right. So it does play on your ego. It can mess up your life a little bit, because you're put on a pedestal. You're now our superstar. You're our saving grace kind of thing. So just trying to keep it real, really. So back in those days, I was brutal, honestly. It's hard work. First 6 months, there's something that you need to get through, because especially if you've got a partner, the boys have 40, 50 mates straight away, whereas the partner is at home not knowing how to even buy stuff at the supermarket, doesn't have friends. So being a better husband at the beginning is something that I've always taught, if you're a married man.
I'm keen to hear, since now that you've done all of these deals, how can you teach us to be better negotiators in Japan, or so that a win-win for everyone, perhaps, in going into negotiations in Japan? Is there some your top three tips? Or we can
top three tips.
distill it down to that.
I had my enemies as well, so I can't say that I was perfect at it, because, I mean, 20% of the time you're fighting. You know, you're fighting with someone they don't like you. 80% of the time everyone likes you, kind of thing is the way I operated it. And why was that? Was because I was quite brutally honest. That's probably the Kiwi in me, very direct. Whereas, as you know, Japanese are indirect. They're sometimes maybe could be a no or could be a yes, whereas, you know, us Kiwis, we want to know, is it a yes, maybe, or no? So I made sure that I knew what was, if it was a yes or no, without, you know, insulting the culture. So I think it's just being brutally honest, really.
Yeah, brutally honest. How do you do that in Japan? I mean, give us an example. I'm feeling something going up my spine as you said that, and I know what you're saying, but how do you do that? Because it's a really great way to be able to be successful in Japan. If you can be brutally honest, perhaps it's bringing in that kindness you mentioned before. Have you got an example, without giving away too much, of where that went quite well, where your brutal honesty held somebody in a space that was safe for them, but brought them through to be a different person after, right? Or something maybe that didn't go quite well?
I remember once, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but it doesn't worry me. One of the general managers of a Japanese team, he was an arrogant man, to be honest. He sort of rang me up and said, had a bit of a go at me for something that had nothing to do with me, but I had all the information that I knew about it. And on the phone, I went "choshi nonna" to him.
Choshi no uma.
No, choshi nonne.
Yeah, choshi nonna.
I'm not going to get into this with you, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And he goes, Tim-san, do you actually understand the word "choshi nonna"? And I said, yes, "choshi nonna." And it was one of those moments where I'm extremely angry, but I was very calm about it, and I said the word. And it's very insulting to say that to someone in Japan. And then we ended the conversation. 12 months later, the same guy came up to me and said, "Thank you for saying that to me, because I was that person. I was arrogant, and you're the first person to be brutally honest to me like that. And I changed my ways, and I want to start again, build this relationship again." And it's, you know, those sort of things that at the time I thought, I would probably cross that line a little bit too much, but. You know, he still came back 12 months later and apologized, and, you know, we did great business together after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent story. It's like, it's kind of, you almost knew that person needed to change for them to be successful as a person going forward. But that's really amazing. Gosh. Yeah, I'm stunned.
Yeah. There's other ones I can't say, but, you know, there's obviously been a few incidences with foreign players in Japan. So I've had to be quite honest about maybe we should make that player come back to New Zealand for a holiday, because we don't want things to come out in the open. So, yeah, there's been many incidents. Well, not many, luckily, but a few instances that probably can't be repeated.
What are some of the things that do tend to trip players up? Like that they maybe is okay in New Zealand, but not okay in Japan?
Alcohol, definitely.
Alcohol.
Yeah. As you know, zero tolerance in Japan with drink driving. So you can't drink anything. So I've had many cases where they've, you know, she'd be right, I had 2 beers, I'll just drive myself home, and then, yeah, it's not all right.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest problem. It's loneliness, and alcohol has stuffed a few players up over the years.
That alcohol one is a big one, isn't it? Like, maybe people don't often understand that you're on the clock for your team, even when you're not on the clock for your team. Yeah. And until it really takes a long time for people to realize. And same if for any business, any job that you have, you're on the clock for your company on your Sunday or Sunday evening, as well as, you know, any other day of the week. So that's something for people to keep in mind. Yeah.
And it does affect your performance as a professional rugby player as well. It's, you know, over the years, I've seen some guys, even coaches, turn up, you know, going out to 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they expect to function at 8 o'clock in the morning for a, you know, a training run, which is, it's not good.
Yeah, you're right. It
Right.
affects your performance and your judgment, doesn't it? There's always the times where I've had one too many glasses of wine and I'll think, I promised something that I shouldn't have, right? And the next day you're thinking, why did I say that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good point, is to be careful and moderate around the alcohol. And so when rugby players come into Japan, are you giving that kind of training, guidance, help to them, or is it something that they get and then forget, and it's only when an incident happens that you can remind them? What happens there with bringing people in? What's the onboarding for Japanese contracted players?
One thing we definitely always do is when we set them down, they're about to sign the contract, you talk about the zero tolerance of alcohol. I talk about past experiences. Some guys that have, really stuffed up their career because they went out boozing and they hit someone, or they went out boozing and drove. That made sure, and I've done over 500 players into Japan. Pretty sure that probably 499 boys, I told them this is the number one thing that you got to be careful of. And there were some guys that I refused to represent as well. I would tell my business partners that I do not want to send that person to Japan because we know what their background is. Behind the scenes, everyone knows who's not a good person.
Right. So you can be a great rugby player, you can be the fastest on the field or whatever it might be, but you may not be brought in because of your character. So character matters in Japan, right?
Oh, huge.
Not only for rugby, but for all sorts of relationships.
Yes.
Right. Is that key then to building relationships in Japan, the character part of things? What would you say?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I did so well in Japan was because I was brutally honest about, this guy has this background, so you got to be careful of that player. Or I made sure that I've sent the players to the right teams. If someone's from, for example, if someone's from Invercargill and he goes straight into Tokyo, it's a massive culture shock to them. But if he goes to someone like Kamaishi or Honda or Panasonic, which is more out in the rural area, then they actually adjust well. So I made sure I tried to, I guess, not manipulate it, but try to put them in the right place that matches both their character and the team character.
Yeah, I can totally relate to like that. And someone did me a favor a long time ago when they sent me to Japan, because I'm also from somewhere near Invercargill. And they said, no, you won't last in Tokyo. You're going to Tohoku. And here I am in Fukushima now, and I'm very pleased that they sent me here. I didn't think so at the time. I was like, I want to be in Tokyo. Tokyo's where all the fun happens. But yeah, I think turned out to be a lot happier here in Fukushima, that's for sure. So yeah, that's really great that you have that skill to see where people might succeed. And you can always trade up later if you get used to Saitama. You can move to Tokyo later. Yeah, it's a great way to make people hit the ground and be more successful.
Yeah. And from, you said 500 contracts there, Tim. Very quietly you slipped that in. That's a lot of contracts. I mean, I'm a lawyer and I do contracts, but I don't even know if I've done that many. Well, I might have, but what's your learnings from those days of being in the agency here in Japan? Things that really, really were great, that really went well, that you'd like to help people understand, that might help them if they're thinking of doing something similar to you, working in Japan, maybe not exactly the same job, but working in Japan and being successful here?
It comes down to, once again, being honest. I think you can't try and manipulate people. You just got to use your ability and be as honest as possible. And I've always believed my upbringing has taught me to be, as honest as possible and have had high integrity and moral standards. So just keeping those standards high. And I got told so many times that you probably can't do this, you shouldn't do this, but I ignored everyone and pretty much did it my way anyway. So
I did it my way. That sounds familiar.
What's one of those? Can you tell us one of those stories when you did it your way and it worked, even though everyone said like, "Nah, you can't do that"? Just off the top of your head, there.
Yeah, there's a negotiation deal. Someone needed to sponsor a certain tournament, and everyone said, "No, there's no way you're going to get money out of that crew." And I also went to a language. This is a weird one, but it's a body language class. Literally the week before, and how do you manipulate people in a meeting room, and just certain things you do in a meeting room that makes the other person want to understand and believe what you're saying.
Tell us.
Oh, for example, if you lean forward in a meeting room,
what I just did.
Yeah.
and you stay there, within 2 minutes, the other person will start leaning back and sort of go, oh, I'm letting him or her lead me. And those sort of little things like that I learned, and taking those into a meeting room, and I remember doing this sponsorship deal for a company or a tournament, and trying to manipulate this rep with body language, and by the end of it, goes, yep, Tim, I believe what you say, and we're gonna sponsor that tournament. And I was, inside me, I was laughing because I was just like, that was a real body language sort of learning moment there.
And is that the one that they said you wouldn't get the sponsor for, and you did?
Yeah, people around me said, no, you're just wasting your time with them. It's tie kicking. But yeah, within a couple of months, we got a good sponsorship deal and good relationship going forward as well.
Wow. Okay. Well, now you're running your own agency. You made the big decision to go out on your own and start your agency. Tell us about what kind of work you do, what are the services you provide, and maybe a little bit about why you decided to do that. Because you've been in a big agency. Why would you want to go and do it yourself? We think it's great, but tell us why.
Well, it's funny. Even the opposition rang me up and said, why did you're ahead of the game. Why did you leave? And it just came down to, I have a passion for helping people. And during lockdown, what I noticed was there's a lot of single mothers. There's a lot of elderly Japanese in Auckland. There's a lot of Japanese struggling in Auckland in general. So how do I create almost like a Japanese community centre to help these people out? And then it came down to, I can't keep this rugby agency going as well as doing that as well. And something had to give. So I sort of said, well, sorry guys, I'm out. I want to concentrate on helping other people, but also obviously need to earn some money as well on the side. So that's why I sort of went out and said, well, what I have learned is I know how to get into Japan. I know how to negotiate in Japan. I know how to open doors for people. So starting up a consultancy business where I can help, medium to, whether it be medium to large, to small New Zealand companies get into Japan. How do I go and meet someone at Mitsubishi, or how do I go and meet someone at Panasonic? Well, I know all the people there. So helping them out get, succeed the way I succeeded in Japan as well is basically what the consultancy business is. But the reason why I did it was so that I can start up the community centre.
Tell us about this community centre just a little bit quickly while you're mentioning it.
Yes, I've got like a couple of restaurants also provide me with food, so I can provide people that need, I guess, on low income or on a single, mother's salary, providing them with food every month. Plus, there's a lot of domestic violence that I've seen as well. So we're trying to set up a helpline through our church at the moment as well. So yeah, just concentrating on how to take care of people better. I've taken care of rugby players all their lives. It just so happens I was good at negotiating on the side. So I'm just trying to do the same thing, but in the Auckland community.
So it's a for-purpose part of the way that you do your work now, and being by yourself and running your own agency enables you to also give to the other part of your business, your life that you want to give to. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. That side is 100% voluntary, so it's I don't get paid for that. It's something that's my passion.
Yeah. So you talked about how you help people get into Japan, you help negotiate people into Japan, you open doors.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit more about that, how you do that? What does it feel like to work with Tim when we ask you to help us? I'm a Kiwi exporter. I've got a great product. I've got a great service. I want to go into Japan. Tim, help me. What do you do to help them?
So one, I'll sit down with their team and say, okay, what are you trying to sell? Where are you trying to go? And then I basically come in as an advisor. So there might be some projects where I'll spend only 2 months with the person, or I might spend 1 day a week or half a day a week with that company, saying, well, why don't we look at reaching these different, so for one example, I'm doing a whiskey one at the moment. So how do we get into department stores? How do I get into the whiskey distributors? And during those trips, I'll go and meet the people and say, okay, I've met with so-and-so and so-and-so. We should tie up with them and then start their business together. So rather than trying to do it yourself, wasting 2 years of probably your company's life, I could do something in 3 or 4 months. It's basically it's what I can do.
You can really speed it up for people.
Yeah.
Get them in there. And so it sounds like you have your values which are really important to you. What kind of company do you want to work with, or what kind of clients are you looking to work with? What do you look for?
Well, I was still starting out, so I guess it's early days for that sort of things. But you just know when you're in a meeting room, can you relate to that person, or can they relate to you? And I think it's vice versa. I've turned down a lot of offers so far because it doesn't feel right.
Right.
So if it doesn't feel right for me, and it's not a good feel factor, then I'll just turn it down.
And are your contracts mostly, like, as you just said before, 2 months, short term, so that you're really almost like your brutal honesty, you're short and sharp and you get there quite quickly? Is that how you like to operate rather than long-term contracting? Or just depends on the kind of client or on the product or service?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've always believed if you're doing a good job, you work yourself out of a job. It's almost what I did with my last job. Is I made sure that when I left, that it was left in a good place where I was no longer needed. So the people that I put in, ex-client of mine, Corsair, so I made sure that he was well trained, that I wasn't going to be missed once I left. So yeah, same thing.
So what's coming up for you that you see in Japan that you think New Zealand businesses could really help or serve Japan going forward? What are you seeing from your vantage point?
And to be honest, it's a great unknown. To be honest, I think Japan's about to rocket. Going good places. To be honest, New Zealand's doing all right, and I think there's a lot more things we can do in Japan. It's not just limited to New Zealand, but I think the way the world is heading with all these sort of world wars, and Japan's quite a safe country to do business in at the moment. It's an aging country, but at the same time, the younger ones are more willing to go out and ask for foreign help, whereas the last generation probably wasn't.
So if we're thinking about coming into Japan, Tim, what makes a Kiwi in particular, perhaps? Is there something that we have that's an X factor that we can bring to the way that we do business with Japan? I think it would be really helpful from your perspective. You've been here for so long, done so many. Is there something that you think it's innate with the way that you've approached as a Kiwi?
Well, I think any foreign person could do well in Japan, but the reason why Kiwis do better, and I'm probably being biased, but I've dealt with the other countries with rugby players, they're more humble. Kiwis are it's a bit hard for me to say, but we're a little bit more humble. We're down to earth. We like to roll up our sleeves a little, and we respect Japanese culture. Whereas I notice you look at all the coaches that I've sent into Japan, and the ones that succeed are the ones that respect and understand the culture. The ones that go, it's my way or the highway, they never succeed in Japan. Whereas the coaches that I've sent to, or the good players that I've sent to Japan, they understood and wanted to learn the culture, and they adjusted themselves to change with their culture. Whereas I can brutally say Australians don't. They when
Cut.
later, but well, it is. It's all about my way, and that's how they didn't succeed in Japan or the other countries. Whereas Kiwis tend to adjust and understand the culture.
There you go.
Is there anything though that also continues to surprise you about Japan, even though you've been connecting with Japan for a long time, the way things are done compared to New Zealand? And things that you just let go. What's the sort of thing that you're talking about rather than taking the highway? What kind of cultural thing do you just let be? Where's somewhere that you might tackle a little bit? Shall we use a pun there?
Yeah.
Tackle, but ones that you just leave on the sideline. Oh, that was good.
Oh, well done, Catherine.
Yeah. The puns
on the fly.
Yeah. Well, you have to be patient with Japanese. That's the biggest thing. I think I remember dealing, one of the companies telling me, "Sorry, Tim, but they might be the nicest guys in the world, but then they have to go and deal with, the board members or the 2IC, and they'll Japanese will say, we're like the Titanic. We're massive, but it takes a lot of us to turn this ship around." So dealing with Japanese companies, you have to be patient because you have to deal with all levels, whether it be high, middle, or low levels management, I guess. So patience, but also not giving up with, if someone says no, that doesn't necessarily mean no from the person above him or her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It could become a yes. I would love to hear like an example of when you've had like a negotiation and you've had this really like kind of I my answer and how you've managed to sort of bring them to give you a clear yes or no. Do you maybe have a story you could share with us like that?
Yeah. I mean, when you sort of promote players, you normally have sort of 2 or 3 offers on the table. So I might have had an offer from someone from Osaka, someone from Saitama, someone from Tokyo, and I've always given them clear deadlines. By Friday, such and such, I'll need to have your final offer because this player needs to decide. And so some of them think you're joking, but then I guess consistency. I've always said if I've set a certain date, and that date has to happen. So it's just making sure you have multiple offers, really.
Okay, so you're teaching them how you operate as well
Yep.
by sticking to those deadlines. And so when
Yep.
you say it's Friday, and they miss out
Yep.
otherwise if they haven't come to you by
Yeah.
Friday with their offer. And then they learn,
And
oh, we
yeah.
better be on time next time with Tim.
Yeah. And I've had management hate me because of it, because, well, you didn't give us one last chance. And well, there's no last chances. I gave you a deadline.
They want one last chance. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So you're showing where you stand, right?
Yeah.
If Tim means it. If we don't come back to him by Friday 4 p.m., he's going to move on. So you get that reputation. It's not the other way around where, oh, he said 4 p.m., but he really means Monday 9 a.m.
Yeah.
So we can think about it. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, if you were writing a foreword to a playbook for working in Japan, Tim, what do you think would be in that foreword from you? Tim's advice on people taking that path of entry to Japan. What would be the key things you pop in that forward? I've asked you to write the book. Well, not the book, the forward to the book. I'll write the book. Tim's words.
Building relationships is the most important thing. I think you can't just go send an email and say, I want to do this negotiation. You got to actually build the relationship first.
How do we do that?
Go up and visit them. Year one, I remember I did 16 trips to Japan 20 years ago, making sure that every time I sent someone over, I was there. I was meeting the shichos or the butchers of the company, and those relationships are they're still good friends of mine now, and we don't do business together, but we're still mates, and we'll catch up for a coffee or a glass of wine, and so it's putting the effort in to build relationships. I think that's the most important thing.
That's number one. What else comes in that forward? Because I'm going to be reading what you're saying, and I want, relationships. Okay. What else does Tim have to say about opening that door here and being really successful?
Well, I guess I have to go back to the basics where, how did I do it 20 years ago? And that was, back in those days, you had to send faxes because they wouldn't accept emails. And I'd just ring the front desk up saying, can I talk to Mr. Nishimura from the rugby department, and if that person said no, I can't introduce you, then I'd find another angle and then come through a different angle, and because that's how I did it back 20 years ago and succeeded. So if you're doing it again, it's the same concept.
Just keep trying all your angles.
Yeah. And use your relationships.
Away the first person. Yeah.
And I think Jesse, who you interviewed a couple of weeks ago, said the right thing is, it's through those relationships that you end up opening other doors, and that's the way she got into Japan as well.
Yeah, you never know who's going to open that door for you. It could be the person who works the elevator, like literally the lady on the elevator could lead you up to see the CEO. Like, who knows? Yeah.
I mean, I remember I got invited by one of the Formula One teams to go up to Mount Fuji Formula One, and you're in the VIP sections with all the drivers as well. And I remember going afterwards. You had to make your own way back to the train station, and it was a 4-hour line to get onto taxis. And Japanese would just stand there for 4 hours and be quite happy about it. So I went to the front of the line, met these 2 Japanese people, and said, "Can I pay for your taxi fare if I can jump in the same car with you?" I've been friends with them for 15 years. Just through you just do things out of the norm. I wasn't going to wait
beautiful.
for it.
That is so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What's coming up then for you, Tim? Things that you're happening in your business that perhaps people who are listening could hear about? Is there anything that you'd be offering if someone wants to get in touch with you? Is people who listen to this might think, oh, I'd love to get in touch with Tim and find out more and have him help me.
I can only give examples of what's happened recently, and I've had a few companies go, well, we've done business in China, but we don't know how to get into Japan. What do we do? Can you sit down with us? And it's simple. I'll meet with them first up. There's no charge. It's just sit down, chew the fat, and this is what I think I can do for you guys. And then you either hire me or you don't.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. When are you coming next to Japan?
I'm actually taking my son up to Japan in March. He's off to Toyo University for 4 years.
Very
playing
good.
Rugby and studying, which is good.
He's playing rugby and studying.
Yeah.
Great.
We hope to catch up with you when you're in Tokyo in March if you're around.
We'd love to. It's our 1 year anniversary of Jantles in Japan, and we would love you to be part of it.
Yeah, if it works for your schedule. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving us this insight into what goes on with like various negotiations, how you can help maybe Japanese people to know how to work with you if you're becoming a negotiator in Japan. There's some really great tips that you've given us today, and we hope that you are successful. Well, we know that you're going to be successful with this project that you have going on in Auckland. And as we're talking at the moment, we've just had the torrential rain happen a few days ago, and people in Auckland are not even started recovery yet. I don't think it's a long way to go. Is there anything that you can think of off the top of your head where if people are listening to this, they could go and donate or something? Is there like a particular web page or somewhere where if people like give a little page or something that's going around?
Is there someone centralizing any of that or decentralized?
Yeah, I was at the pool and the sauna this morning, and you could hear the anger towards the government at the moment because there's lack of that sort of stuff. Whereas I think the local community is just rolling up their sleeves, and because I know even my community is a Facebook page, and how do we, who's in trouble, can we go down with shovels and help you guys? And that's awesome. Just good to see Kiwis just going out there and helping others. Which they're doing because they're probably not getting the right support from government at the moment, but from what I'm hearing.
So if we hear of anything, we will pop something in the show notes where people can donate or contribute in some way to help Auckland recover from this awful flooding that they've experienced.
Any last words, Tim?
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
See you in March.
We'll see you in March.
Yes,
congratulations, Tim, on being a really, honestly, truly successful jandal in Japan. And thank you for telling us all about your story today and sharing your tips for success in this land of the rising sun. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, what a great interview with Tim. I loved hearing about what goes on in the background of those sort of negotiations for getting rugby players into Japan.
Yeah, and some of those pitfalls that we need to look out for, right? The old alcohol.
Yes, right. The number one thing that trips people up. And I would say it's not just rugby players, right? No. Everybody who comes to Japan needs to be careful about alcohol usage while you're here. It can derail your life. Like people lose their jobs for this regularly here. We've just seen one minister of something have to be relieved from his post for getting done for drunk driving recently.
Japan is very severe on all of this, right? Potential clients, not that I can help them because if it's litigation based I can't, but people will contact me who are Kiwis or others and they've got into trouble in Japan and they're doing this kind of silly thing. Often it's getting on a bicycle when they've got out of off a train stop and they've had a little bit to drink and they just borrow someone's bicycle to get home and think it's all right, and they get caught for that.
Caught for stealing the bicycle, or
for borrowing,
for
as they
being
put it.
intoxicated.
Well, both, right?
On the
intoxicated
bicycle.
On the bicycle and then driving the bicycle, riding the bicycle. That's not theirs, and so it's not borrowing, it's taking. And so just being really careful on those sorts of things. And not being, the arrogance of, well, I was only borrowing it. Well, actually, no, you stole it.
You stole it, yes. And you're intoxicated. double
Yeah.
whammy. Yeah, because you're not actually allowed to ride a bicycle under the influence of alcohol. It's also not okay. Even though I know a lot of people do that here. It's actually not okay. Yeah.
But
the limit is 0. Yeah.
That's right. Japan has the 0 tolerance, and it's really important that we that's one of the things that we can't change about Japan, and neither should we. And I don't think Japan's going to be giving up on that anytime soon. So that's one key aspect of being successful here, is to follow the law, follow the rules.
Know that you are on the clock for your company 24/7. It does not matter that it was Sunday night. This is going to come back to your company and you're going to be in trouble. So don't do it.
You are ambassadors for your country, in this case, New Zealand. Every single day that you are out there, people ask you where you're from, what you're doing. They're watching all the time. Please be on the clock. Yeah. Speaking of clocks, I really loved when Tim spoke about boundaries on his scheduling, and he would give an offer to people and they had to come back to him by a certain time, and if they didn't, they missed out. I think that's really, really important. Is that sort of flexibility on things, but not on a time frame. I loved that he talked about that. Deadlines, be really, really bold on your deadlines.
I guess especially if you're negotiating with 3 potential offers and you want people to give you an offer by a certain time, then you need to teach those places how you deal with offers, and that you don't accept offers after X time. It's a great way to think about doing business if you can keep that boundary.
Keeping that boundary, right? And he talked about the successful parts of Kiwis is to be humble, down to earth, roll up your sleeves, respect Japanese culture, but in the same way, often say Japanese are flexible and like flexibility, but the boundary around time and deadlines, I think, is really quite key. And I really want to pull that out. I think is one of the key things that he said today.
Yeah.
How about his being honest and being brutally honest? That came out so many times.
Yeah,
I would brutally honest. Both of us have had coaching in our lives, and I think that is also very important, is to be respectful in the way that we deliver that brutal honesty. But it actually does matter and helps people in the end, is that great example he gave.
Yeah, that was an amazing example of telling someone where to get off when he really needed to. Oh my goodness. And that it worked out in that case in the end, and that's great. But yeah, the 80-20, right? 80% of people are going to like you, 20% are not going to like you.
And we aren't always in the work we do to be liked. It's about respect. And if we can build it through being honest and sticking to your values, and Tim's, values of trust, integrity, and conviction with his business, I mean, that makes so much sense. And I think the third thing that he called out was just relationships. We've had this as a golden thread through all of our episodes, but at the very beginning, he talked about caring for people, right? That's how
caring for his players,
how to do it. Because he said there's no how to do it when he came into Japan, and there often will not be a book. We hope that people listening to these episodes are building up their how to do it for Japan, but look after people well. He mentioned many times about someone he knew 15 years ago, or he met in the taxi line. And they're friends now because they shared a taxi, just that way. And I think Tim's got a real knack of building relationships. And I feel with his business, he was being humble himself, but he's got a real way of helping people get into Japan, negotiate open doors. And
sounds like it.
The negotiator king. Woohoo!
Yeah, well,
what a great episode.
Yeah, we'll put Tim's information in the show notes. And if you want to reach out with him, please tell him you heard about Tim on Jandals. Yeah.
Indeed. Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Kia ora.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jane. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!